All right, so we're diving deep into youth program director interview prep. And to help us out, we've got a ton of resources from RoleCatcher. We've got career guides, interview guides. They even have an AI platform. So we're going to take all that information and we're going to try to give you what you need to ace this interview. So let's get started with what this role is really all about. This is more than just, running youth programs.
Right.
It's really about being an advocate for young people, understanding their needs and creating these opportunities that empower them. It's going to involve working with schools, community organizations, families, really building a network of support.
Yeah, you're going to have to be adaptable. You're going to be working in a variety of settings. So you might be in a school one day and then a community center the next. So be ready to talk about how you thrive in those kind of dynamic environments. You're also going to have to be able to talk about the emotional side of this work. You're working with young people, some of whom may have faced some real challenges.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's jump into those interview questions. RoleCatcher provides some great insights into what employers are looking for.
Yep.
So let's tackle some examples. A lot of times one of the first questions you're likely to get is something like, what inspired you to become a youth program director?
Yeah, that's your chance to share your why.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You really want to connect with the interviewer on a personal level and, maybe share a specific experience or a moment that really solidified your desire to work with youth. It could be a mentoring experience, a volunteer role, or even, a personal story that ignited your passion.
And I would say be specific. Instead of just saying, I love working with kids, share an anecdote that really illustrates that passion. Like, did you witness a young person overcome a challenge? Did you see the impact of a really well-run youth program? Those stories really resonate.
They do. All right, so speaking of stories, here's another question that you might get that's all about, showing off your experience.
Yeah.
What experience do you have working with young people?
Right. So this is where you go beyond just listing your jobs and activities. You need to bring those experiences to life. Did you lead a youth group, organize a community event, mentor a struggling student?
And don't forget about those transferable skills. Even if you haven't had the official title of, youth program director, you've probably gained a lot of, valuable experience in other roles.
For sure. Think about those times when you had to be, organized or creative or patient, resourceful. All of those are really important for this role.
And RoleCatcher actually has this cool AI that can help you identify those transferable skills, and then it can help you tailor your resume and even your interview answers to highlight the right ones, like the ones that specific employers are going to be looking for.
First, having data on your side.
Exactly. It takes the guesswork out of it. Okay, so let's get back to those interview questions. Here's one that's a good way, really kind of taps into your creativity, and that is, how do you plan to engage and motivate young people to participate in our youth programs?
Ooh, that's a good one. I like this question.
Yeah.
So they want to see that you're not just going to recycle old ideas. You need to be able to bring something fresh to the table.
Yeah, and you need to be able to speak to tailoring your approach, to the specific needs and interests of the young people that you're going to be serving.
Right. So you really need to do your research on that organization beforehand. Like, what are their existing programs? What are the demographics of the youth that they're working with?
Yeah. And, you can also ask clarifying questions during the interview. Like you could say, can you tell me more about the current participation rates in your programs? What are some of the challenges that you faced in engaging youth?
That shows that you're proactive and you're genuinely interested.
Exactly. Okay. So switching gears just a little bit, let's talk about evaluation. A lot of times during these interviews, you might get a question like, how do you plan to evaluate the effectiveness of our youth programs?
Yeah, data matters. You really need to be able to show your commitment to continuous improvement here. So talk about specific methods you would use, like maybe surveys or focus groups, maybe pre and post program assessments, and definitely talk about how you're going to track participation rates.
Yeah, and connect those methods to the program objectives. So, really ask yourself, how will I know if I'm achieving my goals? What data will I collect to demonstrate success?
And this is another area where RoleCatcher's AI can be really helpful. You can actually use their platform to get AI feedback on your interview answers. So you could practice this question. You could get feedback from the AI and then go into your interview feeling really confident.
It's that practice and that feedback that you're not going to get anywhere else.
Right.
Okay, so budget's always a hot topic. So be ready for a question like this. Can you describe your experience in managing budgets and resources for youth programs?
So you got to be transparent, you got to be accountable. Be prepared to give some real-world examples, like how have you managed to stretch a limited budget before? How have you prioritized spending? Sometimes you have to make some really tough decisions about resource allocation.
Yeah, and if you can quantify your accomplishments, even better. Like, did you reduce program costs? Did you secure additional funding? Successfully manage a grant? Those details really make a difference.
Right. And remember, even if your previous experience maybe wasn't directly with youth programs, you can still draw parallels. And you can always highlight your transferable skills.
All right, let's move on to a question that really kind of focuses on those collaborative skills. How do you plan to build partnerships with schools and community organizations to support our youth programs?
Yeah, so here's where you really highlight your ability to build relationships. Think about those times when you've built successful partnerships in the past. Like, what strategies did you use?
Yeah, be specific. Instead of just saying networking, talk about attending community events, joining relevant associations, or maybe you've reached out to key stakeholders directly.
Yeah, you want to show that you're proactive.
Okay, now let's talk about something that's really essential in today's world, and that is diversity and inclusion. So you might get a question like this. How do you plan to incorporate diversity and inclusion into our youth programs?
And so this question goes beyond just saying like, oh, diversity is important. It's about showing your commitment to equity and accessibility. How are you going to make sure that your programs are welcoming? And how are you going to make sure that they're relevant to youth from all backgrounds?
Yeah, maybe you could offer programs in multiple languages, or, ensure accessibility for youth with disabilities.
Yeah.
Or maybe you could, be intentional about recruiting staff and volunteers from diverse backgrounds.
Yeah. And think about the content of the programs. Does it reflect those diverse perspectives? Does it challenge stereotypes? Does it, promote understanding?
And this is another area where RoleCatcher's AI can be helpful. Their platform can actually analyze your answers. And it can even make suggestions for how to make them more inclusive and more sensitive to the needs of diverse populations.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Let's try to tackle this next question. It can be a little tricky, but it's a great opportunity to show off your problem-solving skills. Can you describe a time when you had to resolve a conflict within a youth program?
This is a behavioral question, so you want to have a specific example prepared. And, choose a situation that you handled well. And really try to highlight the positive outcome. So you briefly describe the conflict, outline the steps you took to address it, and then emphasize, the skills that you used, like active listening or communication, and definitely mediation.
Yeah, and you really want to frame the situation in a way that shows, you were able to maintain a positive and supportive environment for all the youth involved.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about staying current in the field. Sometimes interviewers might ask you something like, how do you plan to stay up to date on best practices and trends in youth programming?
Yeah, this field's constantly evolving. So you want to show your commitment to lifelong learning, talk about professional development opportunities like conferences, workshops, online courses. Are there any publications that you read? Are there any organizations that you follow?
And don't forget to mention RoleCatcher.
Oh, yeah.
Their platform has a ton of resources. They have their career guides and their skill guides, and they've got a ton of information about industry trends.
It's a great way to stay in the loop.
Okay, so last question for this part of our deep dive, and it's all about getting the word out. How do you plan to promote our youth programs to ensure maximum participation?
All right, so this is where you really get to show off your marketing and outreach skills. So think about your target audience. Like, where do they hang out? What kind of messaging is going to resonate with them?
Yeah, are you going to use social media? Are you going to use flyers? What about community partnerships or, school announcements? Be creative and show your understanding of how to really reach those young people and their families.
Yeah, and think about strategies to generate some buzz and excitement. Like maybe you could organize a launch event or, a social media contest. What about partnering with local influencers? I mean, think big.
Yeah, this has been a really productive deep dive so far. We've covered so much ground, from understanding the role itself to tackling those tricky interview questions.
Yeah, we've really laid a great foundation here. And in our next segment, we're going to delve deeper into RoleCatcher's AI-powered tools. And we'll talk about how they can help you fine-tune your answers and really stand out from the crowd.
Yeah, so stay tuned.
Welcome back. We are going to unlock the power of RoleCatcher's AI tools, give you that extra edge in your interview prep.
Yeah, it's like having a secret weapon.
Right. Their AI-powered CV resume builder. It's a game changer. It doesn't just format your information, it actually analyzes the job description. And it suggests how to tailor your resume to highlight the skills employers are looking for.
Wait, so it's not just a generic template, it actually uses like data to create a custom strategy.
Exactly. It's like having a recruiter whisper in your ear, hey, this employer really values experience with budgeting or volunteer management, so make sure you highlight that.
That's amazing. It takes all the guesswork out of it. So it's not just about resumes, right? RoleCatcher's AI also helps with actual interview practice.
Yes. Their platform gives you AI feedback on your answers, helps you refine your responses, and make sure you're hitting those key points.
Okay, so let's say I'm practicing my answer to the diversity and inclusion question. How would RoleCatcher's AI actually provide feedback?
So it might analyze your response and say, great start, but you can make it even stronger by mentioning specific strategies, like partnering with community organizations that serve diverse populations, or providing cultural sensitivity training for staff.
So it's not just giving you like a thumbs up or down, it's actually giving you specific advice on how to improve.
Exactly. It's a personalized feedback loop.
That's awesome. And it goes beyond just content too, right? RoleCatcher also has AI-powered video practice, which means you can record yourself answering questions and then get feedback on things like body language and tone of voice, and even just like overall presentation.
It's like having a mock interview with an AI expert.
Exactly. Okay, but all this tech talk aside, we can't forget about the insights from RoleCatcher's Career Guide.
Right, so we talked about understanding industry trends and showcasing your relevant skills. RoleCatcher highlights the growing emphasis on promoting well-being, physical, emotional, and mental health.
Okay, so how do we translate that into like interview gold?
So think about your experience with programs that support well-being and highlight those skills like mental health awareness, social emotional learning, mindfulness.
So if I led a mindfulness program for teenagers, I should bring that up even if it wasn't part of a formal youth program director role.
Yes, definitely. It shows you're already thinking about those things.
And what about the tech side of things? RoleCatcher mentioned that digital platforms are becoming really important.
Yes. If you have experience using technology to engage youth, make sure you showcase that, whether it's social media, online learning platforms, virtual events.
So even if my experience isn't 100% traditional youth work, I can still show how my skills are relevant.
Yes, it's all about being adaptable and forward-thinking.
Right.
And ready to embrace the evolving landscape of youth programming. Okay, and speaking of adapting, let's go back to that question about resolving conflict.
Oh, yeah. That one can feel a little daunting.
I know.
Like, how do you talk about conflict without raising red flags?
The key is to choose a situation that you handled well and highlight the positive outcome. Briefly describe the conflict, outline the steps you took, and emphasize those skills you used: active listening, communication, mediation.
So it's not about avoiding conflict altogether. It's more about showing that you can handle it in a constructive way.
Exactly.
Okay, let's talk about budgets.
Right.
That question about managing budgets and resources.
Yes. Be specific and quantifiable. Don't just say you're good with budgets. Give concrete examples of how you've stretched limited resources. Prioritize spending. Made tough decisions.
So like if I managed to run a program with a really tight budget, I should highlight that.
Yes. Show how resourceful you are.
And if I can quantify it even better.
Yes. Did you reduce program costs by a certain percentage? Did you successfully manage a grant?
It's all about showing, not telling. Okay, so let's talk about community partnerships.
Yes.
How do I really shine when I'm answering that question?
Again, specificity is key. Don't just talk about networking in general. Mention specific organizations, events you'd attend, strategies you would use.
So if I know that a particular school district needs after-school programming, I could mention that and outline a plan.
Yes, that's great. It shows you've done your research, you understand the community, and you're already thinking strategically.
Awesome. I feel like I can really tackle these questions now.
Good. We're not done yet. In our final segment, we'll cover some additional tips and tricks to help you shine in that interview and land your dream job.
Okay, so stay tuned for the grand finale. We're going to wrap up all this amazing advice and send you off feeling ready to rock that interview. Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive. And I'm excited because, we've talked about the career guide and the interview guide, but RoleCatcher also offers these really cool things called skill guides.
Yeah.
Skill guides. What are those?
So there are like these deep dives into specific skills that are really important for, the youth program director role. And they can help you really pinpoint, what are your strengths?
Yeah.
What are some areas where you might want to brush up? And they even offer suggestions for training or resources to help you fill in those gaps.
So let's say I'm not really feeling confident about my program evaluation skills. A skill guide could walk me through that whole process.
Yeah.
And like point me toward helpful courses or certifications.
Exactly. It's like having a personalized roadmap.
I love it. And while we're talking about, professional growth, RoleCatcher's Career Guide also outlines like the typical career path, for somebody in this role. So you can see, what are those long-term possibilities? But what if I'm just starting out? What if I don't have a ton of direct experience? Does RoleCatcher have any advice for how to land that first job?
Yeah, they really emphasize the value of hands-on experience, even if it's not in a formal director role. So think about internships, part-time jobs, volunteering, anything where you're working with youth and gaining those skills.
Because even if my resume doesn't say youth program director, I can still highlight, those relevant experiences from other jobs.
Yes.
And kind of connect the dots for the interviewer.
For sure.
Awesome. Okay. And, speaking of preparation, I had to mention again how helpful those AI features are from RoleCatcher. Getting that feedback on your interview answers and having that video practice tool is just a game changer.
Yeah, it can make a huge difference.
It's like having a virtual coach. So if I'm feeling kind of overwhelmed by the whole interview process, RoleCatcher's AI can really give me that extra boost.
It can definitely help you feel more confident.
Yeah. So we've covered so much in this deep dive. We've talked about everything from understanding the role to know how to answer those interview questions and how to use RoleCatcher's tools to really stand out.
Yep.
So I hope you feel, well-equipped, not just to land a job, but to really thrive in this field.
You got this.
Remember, you're not just applying for a job. You're really stepping into a role where you can have a real impact on the lives of young people.
Yeah, it's a big responsibility.
Yeah.
But it's also incredibly rewarding.
So go into that interview feeling prepared, be passionate, share your vision.
Good luck.